Welcome to the TriStar Podcast, where martial arts meets family, faith, and personal growth. Join Professor Brumitt and Professor Beane as they share stories from the mat, lessons from life, and tools to help you and your family live like black belts on and off the mat. It's time to train the body, sharpen the mind, and strengthen the spirit right here on the TriStar Podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. We're excited to continue our conversation here. Remember, if you are just joining us or you didn't get to the last one, we're doing a Bible study here on communication. And we left off teasing the fact that we're going to be moving into some communication knowledge from the master communicator himself, from Jesus. And so that's kind of where we're going to be at today. We're going to be talking about the master communicator, Jesus. And we have three key examples that we're going to lead into with. And hey, before we do that, Mr. Brumitt, do you have any key insight before we jump into this one?
I was just going to say, and you kind of touched on it, make sure, these are two parts, so you don't have to necessarily hear the first part in order to listen to the second part. But just for some context, go back to the first part that we did, where, we talked about wisdom before words. We talked about speaking with grace, and salt, if you will, controlling our tongue, and also the power of a gentle response. So if you want to learn more about those, listen to part one, but we're going to pick it up here on part two.
Yeah, and we're going to start today with Luke chapter 19, verse 1 through 10. And in that section, Jesus does a wonderful job because he is talking to Zacchaeus, and he calls him by name. He speaks with dignity, and he creates an immediate connection, right? And as we are talking with our spouse, as we're talking with our kids, as we're talking with the people that we are interacting with, calling people by name, speak with dignity. And as you're talking, as ever, you want to make a connection, and moreover, make a connection. You want to continue to grow a connection if you already have one. And I think that those are some really key insights that we get to learn from those verses.
Yeah, I like the, you obviously said it, but I like the fact that, using the person's name. And we teach this even to our, Storm team members. Obviously, the staff are using it, but the fact that we want to use what we call the 3 times rule. So, one of the rules within the three times rule is using their name 3 times. So when they walk into the door, we're saying, hey, Mr. So-and-so, and then as they're in the class, working, we'll call them by their name again, and then try to use their name a 3rd time, because one of the sweetest sounds to somebody is their name. And especially when you don't think that they know your name or remember your name, it's always pretty important. It makes you feel good when someone's using your name. I'm sure you can agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just pulling out my electronic reader here, so I want to actually read through these verses to bring people in so they have better insight as it is to what we are talking about here in the moment. So we're going to go to Luke 19. Give me just a minute to fill that in. Can you talk about why speaking with dignity helps to build a connection while I'm finding this?
Well, I'm going to use the same words in the definition, so that it's not going to be a very good definition. But there's when you are respecting someone so much or so well in your in speaking with them, you create this opportunity for a warm, inviting connection. And when you have that connection with someone, it creates a bond. And so when you're respecting them and you show them dignity, even if they are, quote unquote, lower status. And what I mean by that is, if for some reason, let's say an educator, you're an educator, but there's a janitor, and that seems to be looked at as a lower status, and how you would talk to them and treat them, even though they're quote unquote a lower status than you. You need to talk with them and talk to them respectfully, dignify their position. Because if you didn't have a clean environment, it would be really hard and would not be fun to do your work in if the janitor themselves did not do what they're supposed to do, and how they were supposed to do it. And so there's no, even in our society, we have higher, lower levels. There really is only, I think, only one level, and that is to communicate to one another in a way that you are equal, because we really are equals as human beings. We may have different positions that God has given us in life, but it doesn't mean that we disrespect somebody's position in life. Does that kind of track?
It does, yeah. Okay, so and again, I want to read this. So this is Luke chapter 19, verse 1 through 10. He entered Jericho and was passing through. There was a man named Zacchaeus who was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but he was not able to because of the crowd, since he was a short man. So running ahead, he climbed up a sycamore tree to see Jesus, since he was about to pass that way. When Jesus came to that place, he looked up to see him. Zacchaeus, hurry, come down, because today it is necessary for me to stay at your house. So he quickly came down and welcomed him joyfully. All who saw it began to complain. He's gone to stay with a sinful man. But Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, I'll give you half of my possessions. I'll give half of my possessions to the poor. Lord, and if I have extorted anything from anyone, I'll pay it back 4 times as much. Today salvation has come to this house, Jesus told him, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save the lost. And so in that we see that Jesus is there. He sees Zacchaeus, who's climbed up the sycamore tree. He calls him by name. He tells him to come down. He tells him, hey, listen, I'm going to stay at your house. And everybody, the whole crowd that's there that's following Jesus, well, he's going to stay with the sinful person now. And Jesus is able to turn that. And what he does there is he gives. So he does a couple things there. He talks to Zacchaeus by name. He calls him by he's climbed the tree. I'm going to stay in your house. And everybody else is shouting and complaining that that's going to happen. And he stands his ground despite what they're saying. And he still says that he's going to stay there. And I think that is a wonderful insight to see that, okay, yeah, he calls him by name. He speaks with that dignity. He immediately creates that connection like we were talking to. And moreover than that, these other people are there that are trying to say that he's doing something bad or something negative. And he stands by what he said he was going to do and continues to do that. So he follows through on what he says.
Well, and the passage, it talks about what profession was he in?
He was a tax collector.
Yeah. And so in that day, you had, as a tax collector, so he was a Jew and he was collecting taxes from his fellow brothers and sisters. Well, generally it's fellow brothers because, most of the women didn't own much at that time, but he was collecting taxes from them to then turn and give to Rome. And a lot of the tax collectors, what they would do is they would take even extra for themselves. So if there was a percentage that needed to be taken, they would up that percentage. That's why he says, look, if I've basically stolen from anybody, I'll give back 4 times of what I've taken.
Yeah.
And so, that's why the followers were looking at that and going, wait a second. Most tax collectors, if not all of them in that day, were looked at as sinners. They were against their own brethren, if you will. And so for Jesus to make that example, and then for Zacchaeus to then go and say, hey, look, I'm going to give half my money, and if I did anything, if I took any money from or anyone else, I'm going to pay them 4-fold. Like that showed, for him, that showed his ability to, basically, in my terms, kind of repent and go, yep, I'm going to follow you, Lord. But it was neat that Jesus made that connection with him, like you said, call him by name, made sure that he made everybody else understand that, well, just because you see a sinner doesn't mean that, I see something different.
Yes. And again, he followed through on what he said he was going to do. It wasn't like he said something, didn't know the external information ahead of time. He knew all the information. He said what he said, and he meant what he said. And despite what other people said or claimed, he still followed through on that. And I think that to me is what it means to be a leader, right? And we talk about that at the studio. What it means to be a leader is being able to take a stand on what you truly believe in, despite what others may say or believe. It also means living your life with compassion for others and assisting others and doing the same through your actions and words. And in that time, right there, we see that he was that they were speaking out against the thing that he said he was going to do, and despite that, he still stood his ground and did what he said he was going to do.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and he did it with dignity. I mean,
Yes.
that was the thing, is he didn't, he didn't belittle Zacchaeus at all.
Right. So, okay, now we're going to move into our next verse here, or verses rather, and this is Jesus and the disciples on the stormy sea, and this is Mark 4, chapter 4, verse 35 through 41. I'm going to read that now so we get an insight here. On the day when the evening had come, he told them, "Let us cross over to the other side of the sea." So they left the crowd and took him along, since he was on the boat, and the other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking over the boat, so the boat was already being swamped. He was in the stern, sleeping on the cushion. So they awoke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care we are going to die?" He got up, rebuked the wind. He said to the sea, "Silence, be still." The wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Then he said to them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And moving on to 41, and they were terrified. And so they asked one another, "Who then is this? Even the wind and the sea obey him." I think that, okay, so there's lots of information right in there. I think it's clear. He's decisive. There's no confusion on those points that he's making. And he even has a little bit of a challenge there. Do you still have no faith? Do you still not believe who I am? And I think that is an opportunity to, again, he is firm on what he is saying. What do you think?
Well, definitely. I mean, one, obviously he's Jesus, so he's going to be direct and firm in what he says. So he has an advantage over us. But to your point, the fact that, as a leader, we do need to be, we need to be clear. We need to be decisive to the best of our ability. I mean, obviously, taking time sometimes on making a decision is one thing, but when you communicate something, it does need to be clear, and not only decisive, but it should calm the storm to a certain degree, just like Jesus did. And utilizing that, whether it's at the studio for us, whether it's at home with our kids, that communication needs to be just that, where it communicates, "Hey, look, this is the direction we're going. Yes, I understand this from you, but this is how we're going to navigate these storms, and we're going to do it together."
Right. And despite, I think doing it despite the chaos that's going on around you, I think is a key point there too, because often in life we have opportunities to make decisions on a daily basis. We have opportunities to be able to clearly communicate our points on a daily basis, but sometimes we get bogged down by the chaos, the things that are happening in life, and it makes it sometimes more challenging to clearly communicate our point. And so despite all of those things that were going on, he was sleeping. Despite all the boat's rocking and going crazy, it's no bother to him. They wake him up. "Hey, what's going on?" Look, we're done. Stop. And then it happens. And despite all of that chaos, he didn't get overly excited. Not maybe excited. He wasn't thrown off by the excitement, thrown off by the boat that's rocking to and fro. He stood his ground again, said it clear, no panic, no confusion. There it is. Now, let me go back to sleep, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, and to have that calm presence, even in chaos, is sometimes difficult. But you, as a leader, have to do it to the best of your ability. And everybody has, different levels, if you will, of that ability. But the more that you exercise it, I do think the better it gets.
Right, because you can imagine, and I'm sure the listeners, you've had a boss, or you can imagine having a boss where tensions are rising, things are getting a little bit chaotic, and the boss starts to go a little bit, maybe irate isn't the right word, but that's the word I'm going to choose to use, irate. And then or she storms off and flies off the handle, and it just makes the situation much worse. But you can imagine the counterpart to that, where the situation is starting to become tense. The chaos is rising, but instead of flying off the handle, your leader, the manager, the boss, remains cool, calm, and collective. And what does that do? Well, that makes everybody else cool, calm, and collected, because they can see that, well, the manager isn't being shaken by this. Mom or dad isn't being shaken by this. So maybe I don't have to be shaken by this either. It's okay. I'll be able to get by or move on past this. And I think that calm sense can be transferred to the other people that you're connecting with, especially in the moment when it is very chaotic.
Well, and as a parent, I mean, you think about it, your kids aren't privy to everything. They're not privy to what the house payment is, or the car payment is, or the medical bill is. They're not privy to necessarily the shopping list and how much that costs. And there's opportunity for them to learn how to navigate those things. But just because you might be worried about those type of things doesn't mean that's you want to transfer that over. But if you are worrying about those things and then your kid spills the milk because you're on edge about those things, then you blow up at the milk. We shouldn't take that out, at that time. We need to be in the kids' chaos, because their chaos is different than our chaos. We have to kind of put that in perspective and go, really, is this that big a deal? Does that make sense? Like when you first started at the studio and you were an instructor, there was things that you didn't know about that you now, as the head instructor of the studio, know so much more about than you did when you first started. But there was a progression that then I let you in on this, or then I let you in on that. But it wasn't like, okay, you started and now you knew all this information.
Well, it reminds, and I'll let you tell the story because you do it so beautifully. But your let's see, how can I set this up without stealing it? You talk about how your mom would answer the phone when you and your brothers were there. Can you? Because I think that really kind of clearly tells this.
Yeah. So my mom was great at this, and so we'd be in trouble, and she'd be yelling at us. And this is back in the day when you had the phone on the wall, right? And so she'd be yelling, and all of a sudden she'd pick up the phone and she'd stop yelling and be, hello. And it was such a beautiful voice. And you wouldn't even have known that there was any sort of chaos happening, because she was able to turn it off just like that when she needed to.
And I think we all can like understand that, because I know my parents were the same way with me and my brother. And I have to imagine, even though the phone isn't connected to the wall anymore, that's that type of environment, that type of presence that parents have today even carries over. And anybody that's listening has had something like that happen before. So I think that is very easy to understand. And that is the kind of duality sometimes as a parent,
yeah,
or as the manager, as the boss, as the leader. You have to walk sometimes where the chaos is going on, and despite that chaos, or despite that second before you walk into the meeting, you walk into the house to meet your family, despite whatever happened before that, that's done. Now you move on to the next thing. Right? You talk about when you doesn't matter what's going on outside, you tie your belt, boom, all of that's left, and now you're in karate mode. And after you take the belt off, okay, fine, then I can pick up the weights that, from whatever it is that's going on outside. But during that time, that has no bearing over what's happening right now. And I think that helps us to compartmentalize things enough that we can maintain that calm presence despite despite however much the boat may seem to be rocking or may actually be rocking in other places.
Yeah, what is it? There's a book called Men Are Like Waffles and Women Are Like Spaghetti.
Yes.
And whether that is, totally true or not, you brought up the word, compartmentalize. Men generally can compartmentalize. Um, it, generally stating more so than women. Women, it's like spaghetti where everything touches everything. But there are times when we're all like spaghetti where it just touches everything anyways. And so, to the best of our ability, if we can make little waffles and put everything into a compartment, especially when it's chaotic, and not let it be like spaghetti, then we're not allowing the situation to dictate our emotions, but we're staying as calm, cool, and collective as we can. And again, that has different taste, smells, and sounds to it with regards to how you're going to do that and demonstrate yourself being calm, cool, and collective. And maybe it is I'm fuming inside, and all I'm going to do is just stir inside and not let it come out. Or maybe it is I'm going to go and to the bedroom and grab the pillow and yell inside of it just to get the emotion out or something. So that's going to look a little bit different for everybody. But it, as a leader, as a parent, it is. And by the way, we lead. Whether you're a quote unquote leader or not, you are a leader, because there's always somebody looking at you and following you or watching you. We need to stay calm in the chaos as much as possible.
Well, I think, okay, so we're talking about communication, and communication is key, and that's the overarching theme that we're threading through here. I know from reading Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leith Babin that in the military, let's say you're on the radio comms back and forth to connect with your team. If it is getting hot and heavy wherever you are, and you're on the radio trying to yell and ask for things, that's the way you're communicating to them. They're not going to be able to understand you very well if you're yelling, screaming, shouting, especially on a radio like they're talking about there. So as it relates to communication, if we can remain calm, cool, and collected, despite whatever chaos is going on, then our point can be more clearly conveyed. Then our communication is much cleaner, much clearer on what's happening, because despite the chaos, I'm not at that level of chaotic type of yelling, screaming, shouting. I'm down in a lower, calmer space so that I can clearly communicate. Now inside, it may be way different, but because I maintain that calmness, I can still communicate my point as opposed to trying to yell or being misheard or miscommunicate whatever it is that's going on in the moment. And I think that is a key point to connect as it relates to communication.
And look, as we're young, we formulate our communication skills based upon the environment that we're in, especially ages 3 to 7, and we learn those skills in that environment. But at some point, we become an adult, and we have to make the decision on how we're going to, communicate and handle those type of things later on. Because we all can think, especially if you're a parent of kids, every single one of us has said, I'm sure, well, my mom or my dad did it this way, I'm not going to do it this way. And unless you made a conscious effort to not do that, you find out later, you go, man, I did do it the way that they did it. And I said I wasn't going to do it that way. And there are times where you go, yeah, I didn't do it the way they did it, and you were happy with that. So, understand that in the beginning, it's not our fault, but in the end, it's our responsibility and how we want to move forward with communication, because it is a skill. It just happens to be one of the skills that you pick up between ages 3 and 7 in those formative years, and how you're going to either stay calm when the milk spills, or you're going to be irate. And, again, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Well, and okay, so last point on this before we move to the next one, and I'll help to drive what you're talking about home a little bit further. Those kids that are young, you talked about between 3 and 7, oftentimes kids first learn how to play house, right? That is like one of the first things that they do is they play house, especially as they, go to school or they're with other kids. The boys are the dads, the girls are the moms, because that's the role that is seen from at home. And what all they're doing is they're emulating what they see at home. So if mom communicates this way when they play house, daughter is going to communicate that way. If son sees dad communicate this way, then it's going to be the same way. So what's really interesting about that is when kids are young, they're not necessarily agreeing, quote unquote, to play with each other. They just happen to be together, so they're playing. And the thing that they most frequently play, especially at the beginning, is house. And there is
especially women, or especially girls.
Yes, and there is a uncommunicated set of rules that are happening while they're playing, because the boys are assuming the dad's role, the girls are assuming the mom's role. But if the boy assumes the dad's role and it doesn't connect or work, quote unquote, in the way that the girl sees dad play at home, or dad is at home, then they're not going to play together very long. They're not, that the girl's not going to play with the boy because he's not playing house very well. And the boy doesn't know any better. He's just doing what he sees at home. So, and if the boy is grown up in a household where dad yells and is irate or whatever it is, and then he goes to play house and he is that way, and the girl's like, yeah, that's not working for me, then they're not going to play. And what we see happen is the boys that do that, or the kids that do that in general, they will have less and less opportunities to play house, which means they'll have less and less opportunities to communicate, to connect, to play with the other kids, and they're going to be less likely to have friends. They're not going to grow those friendships that they're going to have otherwise. And we have to do our best as the parents to be sure to, quote, I guess in this, as it relates to this, play house in a way that we want our kids to be able to play house as they grow up, because that's the example that we're setting for them. And the way we communicate with our kids, the way we communicate with our spouse, especially in front of the kids, they're picking up on all of that. And you're not doing that on purpose. They're not doing it on purpose, but that is how they learn. They're going to be learning by emulating you. And you have to ask yourself sometimes, is that the attitude? Is that the conversation that you want to see your kid emulate on the playground or at the babysitters or whatever with the other kids? And if the answer is no, then you need to do something about that, because otherwise they're going to do that and they don't know any different.
Well, sometimes your kids are the best mirror.
Yes.
Or I should say the honest mirror.
Yes. Yeah. They don't have a filter, or that they don't have a filter to know what's right or wrong. They just say whatever it is.
Yeah.
So moving on, we're going to move to John chapter 21, verse 15 through 17. And this is Jesus and Peter. When they had eaten breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said to him, "you know I love you. Feed my lambs," he told him. A second time he asked him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you. Shepherd my sheep," he told him. He asked him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieving that he asked him a third time. "Do you love me?" he said. "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." "Feed my sheep," said Jesus. Okay, so that is really interesting, I think, on a couple levels there, because it's just a very couple small verses there. What's going on? Well, I think that the repeating of "do you love me" is a key part of this. And we have to look into what's going on. I think communication has an opportunity to heal, to redirect, and then to build trust. And I think that Jesus asking, "Do you love me?" is an opportunity for Peter to reconfirm to himself that is the fact. And I think that Jesus is asking him over and over again because maybe Peter needs that reassurance to himself. It's not Jesus doesn't need that. I think Peter needs that.
Well, yeah, and right before that, if you look and see what happened before that, You had the last supper, and then you move into the garden, where Jesus is like, stay up, and well, you have all that happening, but what happened in that was, um, at the Last Supper, Peter was like, hey, look, Lord, I'm all in. Like, I'm not going anywhere. And Jesus is like, well, before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. And so then after Jesus gets arrested in the garden, there are 3 separate occasions where Peter is approached and said, hey, you're one of his disciples. No, I don't know him. Hey, you were with Jesus. No, I don't know him. Like, he did that 3 times. And so Jesus, in response to that, after all of this, after Jesus rose from the dead, he confronts Peter and asks him, and it's really neat to see the threes come together, because Peter had denied him 3 times. So for Jesus to do that, and basically, to your point, kind of heal him in that area. Yeah, Lord, I do love you. He gave him the opportunity to say, like, generically, when, like we talk about at the studio, where, you make a mistake, you bow, you fix it, you move on. It was like, yes, Lord, I love you. Like, yep, I denied you. Yes, Lord, I love you. I denied you. Yes, Lord, I love you. I denied you. Now, I can't prove that those are correlated, but it is interesting that Peter denied Christ 3 times, and then Christ asked him back 3 times, do you love me?
Well, I think what that does too, for us, the readers, but also for Peter, is it reminds Peter that Jesus and God they're all knowing. They know what happens, despite him. He wasn't there at that time, but he knew what happened, and he gave him an opportunity to, like you said, to fix those things. That you gave him an opportunity to 3 times, as he did 3 times, to prove and to say to him that he loves him.
Yeah, and like you said, communication can heal. I mean, that was healing. It rebuilds what was lost.
Yeah. Okay. So okay, the rebuilds what's lost. That's interesting, because so if you are upset at somebody, staying quiet doesn't rebuild that relationship. It doesn't heal what was hurt there. But having a conversation about what happens, while it will be challenging, I'm not going to deny that it won't. It will be challenging, but that conversation, if done correctly, can help to resolve whatever the conflict was. It could also drive you further apart, depending on how the conversation goes. But the conversation needs to happen, because otherwise the silence does not help. It doesn't mend. It doesn't resolve whatever conflict happens. And if that resolve is resolve, and let's say it's you and a friend, then you continue to be friends. Or the resolve is you don't continue to be friends, but nonetheless, that issue was resolved. There's no more pain. It's not like an open loop, so to say, on either end, because it's resolved on both ends, because you had a conversation about it. So, not going to deny that those conversations are easy, because they're absolutely not. However, they are very important to have had those conversations, because otherwise the silent treatment does not help anybody. Yeah, you may need some time to build up the courage to have that conversation. You may need some time to cool down from whatever it is that happened. However, again, that conversation needs to happen, because you're right, it does have the opportunity to heal that. So I think that Jesus communicated in this instance, he communicated with insight, with timing, and with obvious purpose. And I think that Peter was able to pull away what the intent for that was.
Yeah. But Jesus doesn't waste words.
Yes.
But he never rushed them either. And we're not perfect. So, sometimes we are going to rush our words, and sometimes we are going to waste them. And but to the best of our ability, when we are communicating, we've got to do our best to do that we have to, if there's restoration that needs to happen, try to restore whatever needs to happen. If we need to be calm, then we need to be, calm to the best of our ability. And I will say, when and if we mess up, we ask for forgiveness and try to do it better next time, but then move forward, because you can't keep dwelling on it. And that's what, Christ did not want Peter to keep dwelling on the denials. I really believe that that's why he did that, because he didn't want him to be hung up on that. He wanted him to know that, yep, you're forgiven. Now let's move forward.
Right. And it wasn't just the right words, but it was the right words at the right moment. And I think that was, another key takeaway there. And that's something we can all learn something from. It's not just the right words. It's the right words at the right moment, because if the moment's lost and you try to say the right words, they're the wrong words. If you try to say the right words too early, again, you have to say the right words at the right moment in order for them to land and communicate whatever it is that's going on correctly.
Well, I had a conversation with a parent yesterday during lunch, and I told her I was talking, or she's a grandparent, excuse me, and I was talking with her, and she says, you just always know what to say. And I said, well, if we had my wife on the other line, she could assure you that I don't always say the right things. And she goes, okay, all right, yeah, no, I get it. I said, just in this situation, I've been through this with other students, and here's what I found works. So to you, it sounds like, I have the right words, but I just have developed that over time, because we almost always see the same problems coming through, the same or similar situations, just different people in most occasions.
Right, because history repeats itself, and whether that's with our own kids making the same mistake over and over again, or a similar type of mistake over and over again, or it's at the studio where we see different kids making the same, it does repeat itself. And so you build up a set of tools to be able to deal with those different situations. And sometimes you have to tweak them slightly, but more often than not, you can fall back on the same set of tools and they will continue to work as long as you honed them correctly the first, second, or, every time that you have to do it. You continue to hone those skills. And I think if you can do that correctly, then you can continue to fall on those same tools.
Yep. So communication for families, right? We want to talk a little bit about that as well, just to make it more practical for everyone.
Absolutely. And the verse that we have here comes from Ephesians. It's Ephesians 4, chapter 4, verse 29. And here it is. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only what is helpful for building others. And man, how obvious is that for parents, especially if you've been listening for what we've been talking about up to this point, from even just on this show, this one here today. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only what is helpful for building up others. That goes back to me. That goes back to that example that we set for our kids. Are we setting the right example for our kids when they go to play house somewhere? Are they playing house correctly? Because they're going to emulate whatever they see. So be sure that you are communicating with helpful words to build people up, because that's the goal, especially with our own family.
Yeah, and another part along with that is, according to their needs. It talks about in Scripture, to do that, but according to their needs, that it may benefit that those who are listening. And so everybody's needs are different. So the approach in that communication is going to be different. You every single one of your kids may be biologically yours, but every single one of them are different. And how we approach one may be different than how we approach another. Grounding one kid, let's just say, might really affect them, because, oh my gosh, I don't want to be, well, it used to be this, like you would ground somebody and they couldn't go outside and play. Now, if your kids aren't going outside and playing, then that's not gonna affect them. So taking away the electronics, or, even where we've done this before with our kids, is taking all of their popular, I'm using my quote fingers for those of you that can't see me, the popular clothes that they like to wear to school, and make them wear the other clothes that they have in their closet. You would have thought that would have killed one of our kids before, because, he was like, I don't want to wear that, I want to wear what, these clothes. And that was enough in that situation. And also understanding that how you communicate at ages, again, 3 to 7 is going to be different than how you do 8 to 12. It's going to be different than how do you do, 13 to 15 or 15 to 17 and to 18. And it's known, but sometimes it's not always understood because you're going through it. And then once you go through it and now you have adult kids, you look back and you go, yeah, I mean, I could have done a better job at, with communicating to my 10-year-old as if they were a 10-year-old, not as if they were still a 5-year-old. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And I think that's a key insight to make on this verse, to make sure that we're doing it at the level where they are. And I think that is certainly key. And if we can keep that in mind and we're communicating to them, what was I'm going to butcher it. What was the additional phrase that you added there? To their needs?
So according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen.
Right. So according to their needs, I think that is important because we know our kids, but we often think of our kids as younger than what they are, right? Because we've watched them grow over time, and it's hard to sometimes think and remember, oh, now she's 9. I have to make sure I'm talking to her like a 9-year-old, not like a 5-year-old, like you mentioned. And I think that is really key insight because that's so easily forgotten. Because
or we expect them to be a 10-year-old when they're a 5-year-old.
Yes.
Like I'll give you for instance, I almost every single year except for the COVID year. Well, the 2020 we did it, but 2021 we didn't do it just because they wouldn't allow you into schools. But I do a school program at Head Start in Kankakee, and it's during the PE classes, and it's 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. Well, there's every 3 or 4 and 5-year-old, they want to be on top of each other. They have no spatial awareness. They're right next to each other. And this lady who is a paraprofessional there was trying to get them to separate. And she's like, move over. So she would move over one, and then guess what the other person next would do? They would move close. Yep. Yeah. And I just kindly looked at her and I said, you do realize you're fighting a losing battle here, right? And she just kind of looked at me and she goes, well, what do you mean? I go, at this age, 3, 4, and 5, they like to be on top of everybody. I said, so as you saw, you move one, the other one moves next. And then you move another one and the other one moves, and they're always on top of each other. And she's like, yeah, you're right. And so the expectations as an adult, I'm looking and I say, spread apart so you have some room. Kids already think they got room because they're on top of each other, those 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And so we can't expect them to be 10 when they're 3. Does that kind of make sense?
Absolutely, it does. Yeah. Right. And communicating to them where they are, okay. So one way that we do this at the karate school is, especially with the younger kids, so I'm not standing up tall as I'm talking to the little kids, especially if I'm talking to them one-on-one. I get down to their level, I get down to my knee. And even in the younger kids class, when we're holding pads with them, you see us often on our knees, on our both knees or on one knee. And what we're doing is we're trying to match where their height at. Where their size. So as we stand up, some kids are a little bit taller. Okay, so we raise up a little bit, and this kid's a little bit shorter. Okay, then we go down a little bit. We want to be eye level with them, ideally, because that's going to be where we're going to have the most impact when we're at their level. Now, when somebody is in trouble, they're talking to them at that level means that you are on their level. You are connecting directly with them. You're going to, oftentimes, especially with boys, this happens a lot. And I think that there's a counterpart to this that I'll mention here in a second, but oftentimes when we're reprimanding a kid, we want them to look at us. And if we're standing up tall to do that, they're going to be looking around more often than not. Now, that's the point I'm going to come back to. But if we can come down to their level and actually connect with them eye to eye, we're going to have an opportunity to better make that impact. Now, I have heard, and I don't know, I can't test this, so I don't know exactly how true this is, but especially with boys, when they're looking around and you're talking to them, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not listening. They're just there's so much that they're trying to take in at any given moment. Even though they're looking around, they're still listening to you. I have to imagine it's not as good as if they're directly looking at you and only focused on you, but studies show that they are still listening. They are still, hearing what you're saying. At least that's what the studies show. If you get down to their level, you're going to have a much better opportunity to actually connect with them eye to eye, because then not that you're a peer at that point, but you're connecting to them on their level. You're meeting them on their
It's
playing
less
field.
threatening.
It's less
It's
threatening.
less threatening.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's less dominant. It's more, look, because you can still be dominant and be eye to eye with someone. Like you can still take charge and be in control and still be eye to eye with someone.
And we do this at work. You do this all the time. I mean, it's not like you are standing on chairs when you're talking to people. If you're not, quite vertically gifted like some people. I'm not vertically gifted, so but anyways, nonetheless, when you are communicating with people, with adults, even, I think this verse I think holds true, because if you're yelling, if you're making these assumptions, if you're not talking very clear, your communication is going to fall flat, right? So you want less yelling, fewer assumptions, more clarity. You want more trust between the parents and the kids, and moreover than that, with your friends that you're talking to as adults, or the people that you're communicating at work. And again, adults with communicating to other adults need this just as much as anybody else does. So I think that this verse is very key and timely, I think, as well.
Right. And, maybe one last thing on the verse, a lot of people, and this is true, they look at the verse and they say, let not any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. Well, that's the curse words, the talking about people, of course, those are pretty apparent, I believe. But I would even go on to say, again, going back to that, your kids' identity are going to especially be molded and shaped based upon how you interact with them. Even if they couldn't pick something up and you're at the dinner table, they're having a hard time getting math or reading or spelling or whatever, and you just are frustrated and you say, well, what are you, stupid? Like that is not beneficial. It's not what they need. It's not benefiting the listener, them. Now, is that unwholesome talk? That's kind of maybe on the borderline, but I think it still is a good principle to understand that, we need to watch our tongue and how we demonstrate those things with our kids.
Right. And especially in that instance that you gave, what are you, stupid? Unfortunately, that's going to have a counter approach, because they're going to hear that. They're going to assume that they are. And then we talked about this already. They're going to wear that like a badge of honor continually until they do the work to fix it. So the less talk like that we can do, the more build-up talk that we can do, the better that's going to be for our kids, and the better. Like if you think about as they're young, they're like clay, and we're doing our best to kind of shape them into the future adults that they're going to become. But the more words like that we have, the more down talk that we have to them, the less fully formed they're going to be. So we need to try to build them up to mold that clay into the best example that we can, in order for them to become that person who we want, and not something different.
And I'm going to use the opposite example. Is they're not clay. Not that I disagree with what you're saying, but this just does a different perspective. So they're not clay. They're actually hard marble, and we're going to chisel out the things to help them make them who they are supposed to be. And
not who they are supposed to be, who they already are inside, because that clay, the marble, has the end result within. We just have to remove enough material for everybody else to see what we already saw.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. Because if we I want to say wrongly do it, if we chisel too much off, meaning we call them stupid, like that's chiseling off parts of them. And the problem is we go, oh crap, man, I don't want to do that anymore. Well, I've already chiseled some of that off. And then now what do? You try to glue it back on. Well, it was never, and once it's been chiseled off, it never reattaches as tight as it was if it had not ever been chiseled off. Now, don't worry, parents, we're going to still make mistakes. So don't beat yourself up. But just that, I like to look at that analogy too, because man, do I want to chisel too much off?
Yeah. And I like that idea, because again, to me, that the chunk of marble has the end result within. And we have to do the work to let everybody else see the potential that is there. And that's the potential within our kids. And we know it's there, but we have to continue to do the work correctly, to chisel off and to sand, to smooth over all of the areas so that everybody else can be brought in to see what we know is already there. I really like that analogy, that part of it. Yeah.
And the important piece too is that so they can see.
Mm.
Like we want to help them, we want to chisel what we can chisel, but then eventually we've got to give the chisel over to them and, allow them to mold and shape. But we have our part to play at first. So,
yeah. Well, okay.
So be careful how we speak to each other.
Yes. And, I think that communicating like Christ in a world like that we live in today is challenging. Right? We live in a world that rewards the loudest voice, but not often the wisest voice. Everyone wants to talk, but few people want to understand or to listen to what you have to say. So I think that when we are...
Sorry, what'd you say? I'm sorry, what'd you say?
When we are working on our communication skills, and remember, we have to continually remind ourselves that communication is a skill that we can learn to be better at. But that also means that without practice, is a skill that can fall off and we can get less at. In the Bible, I think the Bible is a wonderful, shining example of a communication model that is counterculture. So be slow to speak, be quick to listen, be full of grace, and always anchored in the truth. That, I think, is really how you stand out in a world like we live in today.
I agree, and I believe that when you do that, especially if you're modeling Christ to the best of your ability, and then you ask him for revelation and help on, what needs to be changed and what can still keep moving forward. You can't help but to be more successful in your communication with your kids, with those that are around you as well. And I would like to, I know we talked about that we want to do it like a little challenge at the end here. We did this in our last podcast, but, maybe take a look at the verses that we brought up and, choose maybe one from this episode, memorize it, apply it at home, utilize it to the best of your ability. Speak about it with your kids even. This has nothing to do with communication, but there was times at our staff meetings that, I would be learning something, and then right after I learned it, or even sometimes while I was learning it, I was sharing it with you guys because it just reinforced what I was learning.
Yeah, right. And I think as a parent, if we can do that with our kids, then that brings them along for the ride and allows them to grow as much or in time with us as we continue to grow. And I think that growth is something that we should continually seek out. It's not going to happen if we don't seek it out.
And I will tell you, last year I created a little booklet, and if parents want it, they can reach out to us. But I put together a free guide called 100 Phrases That Transform Chaos into Connection, and it's really packed with practical language that'll it can really help out in stressful moments, and make that connection at home with you and your child. And so, like I said, if you want a copy, just let us know. Reach out to us at the studio. We can get that free copy over to you. Like I said, it's called 100 Phrases That Transform Chaos into Connection.
Well, okay, so as we're building into next week, I always like to give a little bit of a tease. And next week we have a interview that we're going to be doing, which is something special. We haven't done an interview yet. And do you want to tease anything about this interview that we're doing coming up?
Well, it's one of the moms that has been at the studio for years. Golly, how many kids they have? 12?
10.
No, I'm just kidding. They
10.
have 10. Yeah. So 10 kids. Every single one of the kids has either been in the program or are currently in the program, except for one, I believe. She's not in it yet, right?
No, she's in it.
Oh, she is. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So I think that's going to be a neat perspective from someone that has had all of her kids in our program. And she'll bring a good, not only that, she's going to bring some levity to it and some wisdom to the conversation as well, just because there has been some times that she has disagreed with me, and it's been interesting.
Yes. And so listeners, be sure to check back for that conversation that's going to be coming out next week. We'll see you there. Thanks for joining the TriStar podcast, where black belts begin at home. Connect with our community by visiting tristarkarate.com. Follow us on social media and share this episode with a family who's ready to grow stronger together. Until next time, stay focused, stay faithful, and keep training like a champion.